While the demon's voice poured mockery into the dying light, Chekim turned to Conan. Cimmerian. His voice cut through the oppressive weight like a blade through silk. I told you the battles would be the same regardless of path, instinct or knowledge. Both roads lead here. The demon's laughter rolled across the waste, but Chekim's dark eyes held steady. That blade offers both. Use them. He gestured toward the ruins where something massive moved in the gathering dark. This is not Yog-Thul. That was a prisoner testing broken chains. His jaw set. This is an ancient sickness. It has consumed champions far wiser than you, far stronger. They fell because they fought with the blade, instead of as the blade. Conan's branded palm throbbed where the weapon had burned him. Empty your mind of rage, of guilt, of everything that makes the fire yours. Chekim's voice dropped, each word deliberate as a hammer strike. Trust the principle you carry, not the steel, the will inside the steel. The blade hummed against Conan's grip, responding to something in the traveler's words. Esh'niyyah B'Barad is not a weapon you wield, Cimmerian. It is a will-seeking form. Your will must become its will, not submission. Unity. Sekim's hand finally gripped his kalish, drawing it an inch from its sheath. Fire danced along the exposed edge. His element, his discipline, his answer to the principle Conan carried. Bind your intent to its purpose. When that union completes, the traveler's eyes reflected flames that hadn't yet been lit. The weapon will take the shape of your fire. The demon's final word hung in the air like venom, too heavy to fall. Conan drew Esh'niyyah B'Barad in a single fluid motion, and the blade sang, a jagged hymn that did not belong to men. The sound knifed through the dying wind, and the ruins of Khauran seemed to shudder at its memory. His eyes closed. The scent of scorched sand and the reek of ghouls clawed their way from the vault of his mind. The wastes returned, not as memory, but as truth reborn. That night when death came like a tide, and the blade had shown him, not taught, not whispered, but commanded what must be done. He had driven it into the earth, and the desert had screamed. Fire and ice had erupted in perfect symmetry, a storm of opposites devouring the night. Hundreds of ghouls were scoured from existence in a single breath. No flesh, no ash, no cry, only absence. Now that same dark knowing slid into him again, like an iron spike. The blade's will poured through his veins, hammering thought into silence. He was no longer a man with a sword. He was the thing the blade required, a vessel for something older than kings, older than gods. The world fell away. Rage, guilt, doubt, all burned down to clean bone. Esh'niyyah B'Barad throbbed once in his grip, and then it screamed, not in any tongue mortal ears could name, but in the language of pressure and bent reality. The air convulsed, light faltered. Conan's eyes snapped open. The silence that followed the demon's mockery wasn't silence at all. It was pressure, ancient, coiling, alive. Conan's pulse locked with the blade's rhythm. Will and steel fused, not a bond, but an ignition. The desert wind folded inward, as if the world itself braced for what was about to be born. Fire coiled around void, void wrapped around flame. Shape tore itself out of the formless, blazing against the dusk like a scar cut into reality. He was no longer Cimmerian with a sword. He was the will made flesh, the blade given breath. Even the demon, mockery carved into eternity, hesitated. Its laughter caught like a bone in its own throat. For the first time since the veil tore, it felt the weight of something it could not mock. And the blade was no longer a sword. It was will made shape. The blade in his hand was no longer the elegant crescent he'd carried from the wastes. It was becoming. The dual edges, fire and ice, held in opposition, began to spiral inward. The cosmic script along its length blazed crimson and white, the glyphs rotating, accelerating, colliding. Metal that was not metal screamed as it restructured itself according to laws that predated iron. The crescent twisted, the hilt elongated, bone ridges erupting along its length, thickening into a haft fit for two-handed devastation. The blade rotated 90 degrees, locking perpendicular to the grip. What tore itself into existence was brutality given edge, a war axe of impossible size. The crescent blade curved like a sickle moon, beaten into killing purpose, but mounted for cleaving. No separation now between fire's wrath and ice's finality, fused into single cutting principle that made the air weep where it passed. The weapon's weight redistributed itself, not for balance, but for momentum, for overhead strikes, for splitting what needed splitting. No elegance survived the transformation, only function, only inevitability. Conan hefted the war axe, sized for giants, but in his hands it moved like thought, because it was now thought made manifest in unity. The will of the principle merged with barbaric edge. The demon's thousand eyes fixed upon it, upon him. And for the first time in epics beyond mortal counting, Zephyros, the scorcher, the city-eater, the thief of heaven's stolen fire, knew uncertainty, not fear. Gods and demons do not fear, but it recognized what stood before it. Correction incarnate. The cosmic immune system made manifest through barbaric clarity. Conan's lips peeled back from his teeth. Not a smile, not bravado, but the feral inheritance of a hill-born wolf that had stopped running ages ago. Desperation. His voice was Sumerian granite grinding against itself. I've eaten desperation for breakfast. In a dozen hells you've never walked, demon. Bled it, spat it, shat it, and kept moving. He raised the massive war axe. Fire and ice no longer separate, unified in the blade's impossible edge. You think I don't know what I am? A barbarian. Meat that thinks. Dust waiting to fall. The weapon sang its killing song. But I'm meat that chose to stand here. Dust that won't lay down until you do. His volcanic eyes held no creed, no cosmic dialectic, only the stubborn, blistering refusal of a man too God's damned ornery to die. You want proof? He stepped into the swing. You're looking at it. The axe descended, and the blade was no longer glowing. It was rewriting local reality, unmaking the demon's certainty with every millimeter of its arc. By Crom, he growled. I didn't ask for this cursed thing. Didn't want your cosmic games. The hum deepened. A subsonic quake felt in spine and soul. But I took it. And now you learn what happens when a son of the northern hills decides something needs killing. Around him, the thinned veil convulsed. Threads that had been fraying for 3 moons snapped taut. The wound opened. When he seized, the blade began to close. Not through healing, through occupation. He became the suture. Sekhem watched from the pattern's rim, and for the first time in all the roads he had walked, a faint, impossible smile touched his face. So subtle, it barely existed, yet undeniable in the way it warmed the air around him. Gaze flicking through convergence vectors only he could see. A savant reading the bones of a collapsing cosmos. Yasmela's hand tightened around the twin-fang bracelet. The twin serpents pulsed in time with the axe's hum. A heartbeat answering a weapon. 3 threads, 1 weave. The demon's furnace maw widened. A hole of hunger aimed at the very principle of existence. Conan moved, and the world learned what happens when cosmic principle stops correcting from afar, and instead corrects from inside the breach itself, using a Cimmerian as its fist. Unmaker struck twice. Upward cleaves the tore reality like wet silk. Where the war axe's edge passed, Zephyros's dimensional flesh unraveled into sparks of collapsing universes, winking out into the hungry dark. But the demon did not fall. Its skeletal visage twisted into a mockery of a grin. Cable tendril arms, thick as ships' masts, writhed like serpents, tasting blood. The severed pieces dissolved into grey vapor, only to bubble forth anew. Molten mercury threaded with witchfire, hardening in 3 thundering heartbeats into fresh monstrosity. Conan's jaw set like granite. The massive war axe hummed in his 2-handed grip, eager as a starving wolf. But even its reality-severing edge could not outpace the abomination's renewal.
The weapon remembers.
The demon's voice vibrated in bone and marrow.
But I do not die. I unmake.
Shekim moved, his voice cracking across the plaza like a whip. He hides the core, Sumerian. The traveler's eyes, which had watched this city burn in 4 other lifetimes, locked onto the shifting chaos of the demon's chest. The Unmaker needs a clear path to the heart. We must strip the flesh to let the axe bite true. He turned to Yasmela. She stood amidst the ash, the twin-fang bracelet pulsing on her wrist. Now, Queen of Khauran, Shekim commanded, his tone leaving no room for fear. Pin him. Open the road. Yasmela raised her arm. The gold serpents on her wrist seemed to writhe, their stone eyes burning hot as branding irons against her skin. She did not pray. She demanded.
Ishkandrel, Moruveth, awake and strike.
The earth split. From the fissures rose the twin serpents, titans of white scale and violet fire, the ancient weapons of her bloodline. They did not hesitate. Ishkandrel lunged, jaws unleashing a torrent of absolute frost that froze the air into glittering crystal. Moruveth struck from the flank, spitting a stream of star-born fire that turned stone to magma. The dual assault slammed into Zephyros. Fire met ice. The demon, a sound of tearing metal, as the conflicting energies stalled its regeneration. The frost brittled its armor. The fire melted its defenses. For a heartbeat, the chest of the city-eater lay exposed, a swirling vortex of vulnerability amidst the chaos. The path is open, Shekim roared, drawing his own killage. Hold him. The command had barely left Shekim's throat when the demon moved. The twin serpent's jaws snapped shut on empty air. Frost and fire collided with a thunderclap that shook the ruins, but the dimensional flesh they sought to crush was gone. Zephyros did not dodge. He folded reality like a beggar folding a cloth, and vanished. A shriek of displaced air tore through the plaza. Directly above Queen Yasmela, the city-eater rematerialized, a towering nightmare of burning circuitry and bone, hanging in the air like a guillotine blade. His skeletal face twisted into a rictus of triumph. He had baited the Guardians, forced them to commit, and now the bloodline that commanded them stood unprotected beneath his shadow.
Foolish fetus.
The demon's voice dripped with cosmic scorn. His chest cavity opened wide, not in vulnerability, but in arrogant display. The ribs, wrought of living iron, spread like the petals of a carnivorous flower, revealing the core. A knot of dark energy pulsing with the light of compressed stars.
I do not fall for traps. I erase them.
His claws, pillars of burning light tall as pine trees, descended. Yasmela looked up, small and mortal against the backdrop of annihilation, the heat of his killing intent singeing her very breath. But she did not flinch. And Chikim, standing amidst the chaos, did not scream. He smiled, for the demon had forgotten the fourth thread. From the shadowed arch of the highest ruined tower, directly behind the floating demon, a figure launched itself into the void. He did not scream a war cry. He fell in grim silence, a thunderbolt of iron and muscle. Conan. The Sumerian hit the demon's back with the force of a falling star. He did not strike to slash, he struck to burrow. The massive war axe, singing a high, keening wail of unmaking, bit into the demon's armored spine. Zephyros threw his head back, the mockery dying in his throat as he felt the intrusion. Not a cut, but a deletion.
You.
The word died in a wet explosion of dimensional gore. Conan drove the weapon. Muscles corded like steel cables beneath his skin, he churned the axe, hacking, hewing, digging. He was a miner working a vein of living hatred. The blade severed the spinal column, sheared through the dimensional musculature, and carved a tunnel through the abomination's torso. It was exactly as the traveler had foreseen. When he turns his back on the ruins, Chikim had said, that is where the axe must bite. Zephyros flailed, his claws freezing inches from Yasmela's face. He tried to phase, to teleport, but the Unmaker blade was deep within his essence now, acting as a cosmic anchor that denied him the escape of the void. With a final savage heave, Conan drove his boots against the demon's broken spine and thrust the axe forward. Crack! The sound was not of bone breaking, but of a star dying. The chest cavity, still open in its arrogant taunt, suddenly bulged outward. The blowing core, that heart of compressed malice, fractured under the stress of the Unmaker's proximity. In a shower of sparks and impossible colors, Conan burst through the demon's chest. He emerged from the open ribcage like a chest burster from hell, the war axe held high. The core shattered into 1,000 fading embers, destroyed by the very weapon Zephyros had mocked. And then the silence returned. Zephyros did not fall. There was no corpse to shake the earth. The city eater simply ceased. As the core died, the dimensional cohesion that held the monster together unraveled instantly. The massive, towering form did not crumple, it disintegrated. In the span of a single heartbeat, the Titan turned into a cloud of gray, particulate ash. Conan did not step off a body. He fell through the dissipating cloud, landing in a crouch on the plaza stones with the heavy thud of mortal weight. Around him, the ash rained down, dry, cold, and smelling of ozone, covering the ruins in a final, silent snow. The twin serpents roared their triumph, fading back into the ether as their task ended, leaving only the queen, the traveler, and the barbarian standing in the gray dust of a god that was no more. Conan stood, shaking the gray soot from his shoulders. He looked at the pile of nothingness that had been the city eater, then spat into the dust. "He's dead," the Cimmerian grunted, wiping the ash from his brow. Silence returned to the plaza, heavy, suffocating. The traveler sheathed his killage. He did not look at the queen. He simply pointed to the far edge of the plaza, where the ash lay thickest. There, huddled in the gray snowfall of the demon's dissolution, stood 20 men. Their armor hung in melted plates. Their faces were masks of soot and dried blood. They leaned on splintered spears, staring hollow-eyed at the nothingness where their homes and their families had been. "Look, Cimmerian," Sekim said, his voice cold as the grave. "That is the treasury. That is the army. That is all that remains of the Khauran Empire." Conan scowled, wiping black ichor from his chest. He looked at the ruins, then at the 20 survivors, the last driftwood of a drowned nation. "I killed your demon, traveler," he grunted, the massive war axe heavy on his shoulder. "I closed your seal." "We killed one," Sekim corrected. "One horror, Zephyros. And the price was a civilization." He faced Conan fully, dark eyes burning. "Do you understand the cost of this war? If a dozen breach the veil, there are not enough cities in the world to pay the butcher's bill. We cannot trade a kingdom for every kill." Conan went still. He looked at the Unmaker blade. One man, one axe. Against a legion, he was nothing. "Then what?" he growled. "Do we sit and wait for the fire?" "No," Sekim said. "You go north. You and the queen." Conan barked a harsh laugh. "To the hills? With a southern wench? My people will slit her throat for her baubles, and mine for bringing a stranger." "They will not," Sekim replied, "because she is no mere southern queen. She is the blood heir of the Pact." Conan's laughter died. His eyes narrowed. 3,000 years ago, Shakim said. Your ancestors did not bleed alone to bind Acheron. The kings of Khauran stood with them. Her bloodline paid the price, so yours might live. He stepped closer, his presence like a rising storm. Cimmerians spit on crowns, but they honor memory. Bring them a beggar, and they'll kill you both. Bring them the daughter of the shield wall, marked by the old war, and they will listen. Conan looked at Yasmela anew. Gone was the damsel. What he saw now was a living key, one tied to an army his people still whispered about in the gloom of their hills. The twin fang bracelet pulsed faintly on her wrist, still warm with the death heat of the colossal serpents. Gather them, Shakim commanded. Tell the clans of the Snowhawk and the Night Wolf that the great binding has failed. Tell them they follow no man. His eyes dropped to the war axe pulsing against Conan's shoulder. Tell them they follow the principle of correction. And hear this truth. What was buried must stay buried. Shakim turned away, walking into the desert without another word. Ride north, Cimmerian. Raise the clans. When I find the next breach, I will call for the Iron Storm. Conan watched him go. Then he looked at the 20 silent soldiers, at Yasmela, and finally at the northern sky, gray and wolf-pelt cold. Correction, he muttered, tasting the word like iron. Crom. Sounds like something my grandfather would say before he put an axe in a wizard's skull. He seized Yasmela's arm. Come on, girl. Long ride to the snows. And if you want those hill devils to listen, start remembering every story your father ever told you about the old war. They moved north, Shakim moved east, and behind them, the 20 survivors stood vigil over the empty ribs of Khauran, witnesses to the storm to come.